Hello, YouTubers, and welcome to the Multiverse. I am Dan.
And I'm Drea, and we own Multiverse Comics in Culpeper, Virginia. And we have actually already put up a couple of videos because we get really excited about some topics. We realized we should probably stop and take a step back and explain who we are and who we are in the comic world, because we're not writers or anything. We are merely consumers. But what gives us the right and what causes us to want to talk about comics to such a degree. And since Dan has a far richer and longer history with comics than I do, I'm going to let him go first. So just talk about, who you are when it comes to comics.
Yep. I have been reading comics for most of my life, about 3 decades now. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm pretty old. I've been reading Marvel and DC. Primarily a big Spider-Man fan, but I read a little bit of everything.
You read indie comics too. Turtles is a big indie.
Yeah, I read indie comics as well. But for most of my reading was Marvel, DC. I'm not someone who picks a camp because depending upon my time of life, I am reading one or the other. Well, it's also, most of the time both, but
it's limiting as a reader if you're like, well, I'm absolutely DC. All right, well, there's a whole lot of Marvel out there that you're not allowed to read.
Exactly. Spider-Man's my big thing though. For a while, I even quit reading Spider-Man. One More Day did something, and I just had to stop.
Anyway.
Yeah, because bad writing.
It happens. One of our future videos, we're actually going to be talking about when good writers happen to characters and when bad writers happen to characters. But that's fodder for another video. So I'll interject here, and you can feel free to jump back in. But as far as my experience with comic books, I didn't really start reading comics regularly until I was in my 20s when I met him. And believe it or not, comics are kind of hard to read if you're not used to reading them regularly. If you don't spend your formative years learning to read, like I always just go straight to the dialogue because that's how I read. Beyond comics, though, I am a prolific reader. I've been reading since I was 3 years old. I consider myself very fortunate to have been in a preschool that taught me to read. Anyway, and I grew up reading classic children's literature. So some of the books that I read the covers off of when I was in elementary and middle school were The Secret Garden and I didn't really like Little Women. I like the movie better than the book. But I love Little Men and other books by Louisa May Alcott. I really like the Little House on the Prairie series and all of those. So I was not only reading when I was younger, I was reading pretty deep stuff for a child, or at least bigger words and stuff. And currently I'm an English teacher, and I'm also a literary scholar. I take classes on literary criticism and literary analysis. I'm teaching literary analysis, so I'm always teaching myself how to continue to do that. And so for our purposes, for this video or for this channel, I'm bringing the scholarly approach. So he's the history major and I'm the English major, basically. He's got the history in comics. That's not really a degree, unfortunately. But if there were, he could have one. And
history and English are barely a degree, so just putting you out there. There's no jobs. I'm just saying for either.
I'm an
Except
English
for
teacher.
I'm
literally an English
teacher. Yeah.
Anyway. We're also married, can you tell?
Right there.
Yeah, going on 10 years. Anyway, so that's kind of what we want to do with this channel, is we want to take our love of comics and our love of reading and talk about it. This is a comics book club, for lack of a better term. And so we're going to bring up, we'll pull up elements out of either one story or several stories or a character. So far we've talked a little bit about character arcs, and we've also talked about retcon origins, and like I said, we're probably going to talk about how different writers have changed for better or for worse different characters. And also, we're going to take this time to also say, go ahead and comment below any topics that you think that you'd really like us to cover from a comic perspective and from a literary analysis and criticism perspective. And so we'll see what we can do. Anything you want to add?
No, I think we're good.
All right, so don't forget to like and subscribe.